South Africa is battling a surge in kidnappings, with children often becoming targets for human traffickers and extortionists alike. The Institute for Security Studies says the country is ranked number 7 globally for the number of people abducted. Let's speak about this now. And joining us for the conversation is the Teddy Bear Clinic's Dr. Shaheda Omar and crime expert Calvin Rafadi. To both of you, thank you very much for making the time. Dr. Omar, I'd like to start with you, who joins us virtually. When you hear these statistics that 16,000 kidnappings happen in South Africa annually, does it raise alarm bells for you as to who's the target? And I would be very, very worried if you're going to include in there children.
Indeed, it raises alarm bells because children are the most vulnerable and marginalized population group. They are soft targets, and we know that the reality is that children are defenseless, powerless, cannot protect themselves. They cannot actually run away from the situation. And what we're seeing on a daily basis, that just looking at the statistics, which we know, if you look at the reports from Missing Children South Africa, they have confirmed that the statistics are not an accurate reflection of what is being executed on the ground. So these are of grave concern to us because children, we find that reports are made to police stations. And if we just look at the recent report of before Jocelyn Smith, the Ongiziwe Kamlana case in Gugulethu, the young girl was, had disappeared. Mother reported it. Police did not take mother seriously until there was some kind of media pressure, and then a body was found later burnt. So these are the realities and the concerns which certainly does raise alarm bells, that children are victimized, children are the softest targets to be violated. And of course, we know there are organized crime syndicates and opportunistic kidnappings are on the increase. The ransom, the express ransoms that are reached out and of course are complied with, because many families are desperate and will do anything to save and rescue their children. And those cases are not always reported to the police.
Yeah. Before I come back to studio, Dr. Omar, kidnapping or abduction is one thing, but murder, it makes this even more extreme. Are the two connected in this regard?
So there is an intersectionality, depending on the nature of the outcome and the purpose of the children being taken away, whether it's for organ harvesting, whether it's for domestic, forced labor, for compelled criminal activity, getting children to beg on the streets, child trafficking, sexual exploitation. So there are differences, but one needs to understand that there's a connection, it's interrelated, and sometimes children are murdered in the process depending on what purpose the child has been taken away for.
Let's come to studio now. Mr. Rafadi, why are we ranked number 7 in the world for abductions? What is going wrong in our society?
Yeah, good evening, Koli. It means the criminals are acting brazenly, and this act of impunity, and we're not sending a strong message to these criminals. So the market is booming, so they're making money, these people, especially when it comes to ransom, and exploiting kids like what doctor has said, and everything just it's like we're turning a blind eye. But my concern is that many cases, especially when ransom is paid, the victim is released, they are filed and then they just grow dust somewhere in some office. But to support my statement is that I've worked with the police in many cases where we trace criminals who have abducted and are committing these crimes. By the time now you have to catch up with them, they use certain technologies, especially when they demand ransom. But, there are so many red tapes that, a particular general has to sign this form to authorize this particular gadget, this particular equipment, so that these criminals can be traced. So if those red tapes, they can be looked at and reviewed, I'm sure then the police will be so proactive to now apprehend these criminals.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that, you know, to catch up with them whilst they have a victim, it becomes more difficult and more sophisticated. But the time when the ransom is paid, the victim is released, that's when now they go in a relaxed mode. Now we need to follow that money and catch on this criminal. And by doing so, we'll send a strong message.
I'm going to ask what someone will think, no, but that's an obvious question as to who the target is. Is it always clear who the target is? Because yes, Dr. Omar represents the section of society that speaks for the most vulnerable, and that's children, that they can't fight back. You then have business people that have been kidnapped. You have children of wealthy people that have been kidnapped and ransom demanded. Is it clear who the target is, or it just depends on who the criminal is looking for on the day?
Yeah, well, you know, a simple answer, it depends. But most is targeted. For the simple reason, you know, there are kids. That's why it's very important for the government to start profiling every kids that we see on the second robot, where they are with parents we don't know, asking for money. Because we don't know where are those kids coming from. We need to start profiling. We need to start, you know, interrogating those parents. Why is a small child not at school and with you by the robot? But, you know, as citizens, we keep on giving them money. We must start profiling those kids. Now, again, if you look at the matter, the last matter of the Moti brothers in Polokwane, those kids, it shows that they were targeted and they knew that the family is wealthy and they are capable of paying the X amount of the ransom. But to answer you, most kidnaps, they've got their target and they know how much Toli is able to pay. But here's another scenario that we have observed. Most of these things, when they are planned, they've got someone internal who even monitors that the money is being paid and who even feeds the information to the police. And that's why we urge our police not to constantly tell the victim's family on the proceedings of the case, because we realize that by so doing, there's someone who's been alerted, and you know, the criminals then they get a step ahead with the police. So as long as they are negotiators, we trace these particular criminals. The information must be kept to us. The information that comes from the family must only be given to the police, and not the police feeding back the information to the family, because it can jeopardize the case. And we've seen in most incidents whereby they've got someone inside who monitors that the payment is done before the victim is released.
Dr. Omar, you represent, as I again mentioned, the most vulnerable of our society, children. When a child disappears, what do we know to be the procedure, particularly for police officers? When you go to the police station as a family, a concerned family, what do we know to be the standard procedure today? Is that 72-hour notice period still a thing that they go by?
Definitely not. There's no time limit. It's got to be reported immediately, and police have to respond immediately. And of course, an Amber Alert is then sent out as soon as it's reported, you know, a request is made by the Missing Persons Bureau. So for people out there, there's no time limit. The sooner it is reported, the better the opportunity for tracing and tracking the child that has disappeared. And this is something that we have been struggling and grappling with in this country. And I don't always blame SAPS officials. You know, it's lack of training, sometimes overload with work, lack of resources, and families are turned away. As I mentioned, that case in Guguletu, and there are many other cases like that, where families are turned away to say, after 24 hours, you can come back and then we will open a case. Unfortunately, that is not the situation. People need to exercise their rights and ensure that they get immediate responses. So there must be immediate, timeliness, and appropriate responses where children, you know, there's an alert put out for children that are missing.
Affected families or families that fall victim to this kind of crime, there is always the message from the authorities, particularly the police, that do not pay the ransom, but a family is desperate to have their children back. And now that Mr. Rafadi has reminded us of the Moti family in Limpopo, well, that used to be in Limpopo, the understanding is that they've since left the country. We will never know whether that family did pay a ransom or not. But what is it that you tell a family, or how do you persuade a family not to pay a ransom when their child could very well be in danger?
And I think that is a very difficult, delicate, fragile situation, because how can you guarantee any family that if you do not pay the ransom, we will still trace and track your child, we will return your child, we guarantee the safety return of your child? I think that is something that one cannot guarantee. So for any family, it's a very precarious situation, and there's the unlikelihood that they will even cooperate with SAPS, because we've seen many cases go awry where things have not worked out. And the reality is that when a child has been kidnapped or abducted, there is no guarantee of the safety of the child. So I want to also just allude to the fact that it's not only your affluent families that are at risk. We have seen many other families where there's been organized Pakistani syndicates with children going to and fro from school have been kidnapped, and maybe not huge ransoms have been demanded, but those ransoms have been paid, where families have sought, begged, borrowed, and stolen from whoever they could have got money from to ensure that their child will be returned. And those are the cases that perpetuates the cycle of violence, this cycle of opportunistic kidnappings, where children continue to remain at risk, and because families are afraid and fear for the safety, will obviously comply and cooperate with these kind of demands and ransoms.
Yeah. Again, I just want to stick with you for a moment, Dr. Omar, before I come back to Mr. Rafadi. You studied this environment more closely. You alluded earlier to children being abducted, and in some instances, they are killed because people want to use their body parts for whatever reason. How prevalent is that crime?
So again, we don't have sufficient statistics, evidence supporting that. But listening to anecdotal evidence and listening to people in the communities where this is also kept, hush under the carpet, where people are not coming forward, are not reporting, and unfortunately, children are murdered, and we see that body parts have been mutilated and parts have been found in different areas. So it is a growing concern. It is something that we didn't hear of in the past, and we are certainly hearing of it more and more. And I think this is the concern, that the death of one child or the mutilation of one child is one child too many. And if there aren't consequences, and if one cannot trace the perpetrators, unfortunately, this cycle of violence is going to continue.
Mr. Rafadi, back to you. Before we talk about how you can protect yourself as a family, you may not be necessarily wealthy, because children being abducted and killed because body parts are in demand, that's a crime that is absolutely gruesome, and I'm not so sure how anyone can protect themselves enough against that. But when you listen to the Institute for Security Studies saying evidence is showing that this crime of abduction or kidnappings is ballooning in South Africa, and mainly women and children are the targets, does it give you a sense that authorities have a handle here, or it's a losing battle?
Yeah, look, like I said, we need to send a strong message. There's not enough punishment of these horrific crimes, and people are getting away. So, in issues when you speak about kidnappings, especially those which are not copycats. Now, you find syndicates. The very same syndicate, they will receive money. But 6 months, 7 months down the line, they're looking for another victim to target.
Yeah.
So because there's no punishment in that regard. But what you just said, like what the doctor said, indeed, there's no time frame to report a crime of such crimes. The minute you become aware that one of your loved ones has gone missing, you go to the police station. If they frustrate you, you must ask for a detective commander or even the station commander, because they are very much aware about the laws that has been amended, that there is no time frame. Now, issues of mutiny-related, and even cults, for that matter, it has been an ongoing crime, even in most of our villages, rural areas, and even in the suburban areas, whereby certain groups, they perform certain cults, and they target kids who they believe that, you know, it will give them certain luck. But we've seen even in Africa where albino kids have been abducted and even been killed. So that flows even here in South Africa. And another thing why we see a rise of kidnappings again, what I learned, last week I went to Limpopo at one of the local police stations. They asked me, you know, people that are about to receive grant money, especially for disability from the road accident funds, they are kidnapped and ransom is being paid. And, you know, it's an ongoing crime. So even disabilities, when you are about to receive your money for grants, you get kidnapped.
And that's extortion.
That's extortion. But they hold you under duress, and then once the money is being released, or by that time the money has been released, then they ask for their ransom. And, you know, it just goes on and on.
As I said, how do you then protect yourself against such? How are you even able to detect that you could be a target? Is it difficult?
Yeah, look, people must be careful on what they post on social media. You know, living a luxurious life, posting lovely cars and expensive jewelry and access to money, you know, having cash on social media, you can become a target in the space. Even those who are, you know, starting the game of kidnapping, they can easily target you. But another most important thing, we urge our parents and even parents to keep monitoring what their kids are up to on social media. It plays a big role. Now, those also in the rural area, we urge them, if your kids, especially during this time of the season, where it's winter now and we've got this initiation school, a lot of kids, they go missing. As they go to the river to get water, they get kidnapped by some of this illegal initiation school. But by the way, we don't know what is an illegal and legal initiation school. And then some, they even end up dying in those particular facilities.
Yeah.
So, you know, parents have to be cautious what their kids are up to on social media. You need to know your friends, your child's friends, even up to a school, what they're up to even after school, and what they do is, again, like we say, on social media. And even as parents, we must stop posting and boasting even to our colleagues about, you know, our lifestyle. Because the minute people can see you can afford, you can easily become a target.
Dr. Omar, of the cases where children or even women have been successfully returned to their loved ones, are you able to tell us whether they are found in South Africa or they are found outside of the borders of South Africa?
So I think it's a both-and situation where children and women have been found in South Africa and even outside of South Africa. More difficult outside of South Africa, I think less frequently found outside of the borders of the country, and more frequently within the borders of the country. But we mustn't discount and dismiss the return or finding of those people, because if one looks at the trauma and their trajectory and the impact it has on their lives and their interpersonal relationships is really calls for a lot of attention and long-term therapy, intervention, support, because one sees the post-traumatic stress disorder that these people are plagued with and their difficulty in coping with daily functional activities. So just looking at, you know, what my colleague from the Institute for Security Studies said is that the responsibility lies with each and everyone, firstly to begin with family and parents, that they need to monitor and keep a pulse on the whereabouts of their children, regardless of the age. It's not only your young child that is at threat or in a dangerous situation, but even the older children, for trafficking purposes, for sexual exploitation, for all sorts of other challenges that we are, or scourge that we are faced with currently. Parents need to communicate, dialogue with children, engage with them on safety measures, protective measures, and how to respond to those kind of situations should they be finding themselves in those situations. So it's not about instilling anxiety and fear into children, but it is a reality that we have to be prepared for.
Yeah. Mr. Rafadi, perhaps you have the last word. That question about whether these people that conduct these kidnappings reside within South Africa, how important is that question? And do these people operate solely within South Africa's borders, or do they have networks outside?
No, of course they do have network. Like Doctor has said, some, especially those that are abducted, kidnapped for sexual exploitation. Now, but just to explain the modus operandi of these criminals, the guys that are committing cash in transit, because they are heavily armed, they've got vehicles for a pickup. They are the ones who are normally sent to go and do the pickup. Now, the victim, there's different people that stays with the victim. Then there are different people that will set up a Forex account and make sure the money, the ransom is paid. So in that category, everybody has a role. So those that do the pickup, it's only the pickup, but they don't look after the victim. And most of them, we do find them here in South Africa. And once ransom is paid, they confirm ransom is paid, they release most of their victims right here in South Africa.
Very interesting discussion indeed, but also very, very worrying. I want to thank you both for your time. Calvin Rafadi is a crime expert, and Dr. Shaheda Omar is with the Teddy Bear Clinic. Thank you very much for your contribution.